Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Kinda Libertarian. Mike Turpin, my man. How you doing today, bud?
What's up? I'm good. I'm ready
Dude,
to do an episode.
dude, listen to me. Jake Paul, Ben Askren. The fight was last night. Did you see any of it?
Mhm. Yeah, all there was to see. It was not very much to watch, and yeah, for me, it just comes down to I imagine Jake Paul trained way harder than Ben Askren for this fight,
Dude,
and
Ben
as
Askren
a
showed up
result,
like he looked like he just smoked like a ton of weed and ate a pizza and walked in there. He was just like, wait, what am I doing? What am I doing here?
crazy. Crazy. It almost makes you wonder if there was like incentive for him to lose somewhere, somehow, something, because it's either that or he just doesn't have any ambition anymore when it comes to competing and it was just a cash grab. Like he might just be my days of taking competition seriously or over. I'm going to go out there and do my best. If he honestly was trying to win, he did not try very hard.
Well, look, I mean, the fact that he was in the UFC, it means he trained at one point in his life, he trained his fucking ass off. So
Yeah.
he clearly did not train for this fight. And I think you're right. I mean, I think maybe he was just like, look, someone's going to give a boatload of cash. It's like, I'll fucking get knocked down, whatever. How much money are you going to give me? I mean, it makes sense. I would
Yeah.
probably do that too, not by like a professional fighter, but just like a regular dude. I'm like, okay, I'll go 2 rounds if if you're not a real fighter. If I can get a big ton of cash out of that. Some people were saying that it was like he took a dive. I don't know. I don't
I
know.
mean, yeah.
I mean, what do you
Yeah.
think? Does it look like he maybe had done that? Hmm.
Well, I would say this. I could see it being like there's some sort of backdoor incentive. Like if you lose, if you get knocked out somewhere, whether it's related to Jake Paul's team, some sort of boxing promotion, someone along the line might have been like, we're going to throw you some cash under off the record. That would be the way I would see it being taking a dive. The other side of it could be he went out there, got hit hard, realized what he was up against, and was like almost trying to find a way out by stumbling a little extra when they
Okay.
wanted to see if he was okay. I mean, it happens, my original take was that's a man who can knock somebody out and throw a punch versus a man who can't. They're fighting with two different weapons, you know?
It's some people are saying that that this is really good for boxing because it's bringing a lot of new people into the world of boxing. And certainly boxing could use all the help it could get. But then you have that happening. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? As fight fans, I mean, I don't want to see it. I didn't pay to watch. I just saw it. I saw when they reran it. But I don't want to see that. If I want to see a fight, that is not what I want to see. But maybe there are more people out there that do want to see that and they're willing to pay. It's a mechanism of the free market. Is the
Yeah.
free market going to give us shitty boxing, was this just a one-time thing? Because let's be honest, he was coming off it saying, "Look, I did it. People say I couldn't do it. I'm a great fighter, and maybe he is a good fighter. I don't know, but like he hasn't fought anybody who's like a real, contender. He hasn't fought anybody that could really, go a few rounds legitimately with you, like an NBA player and you know and Askren, who was just like, dude, I swear to God, I don't think he knew where he was. Like when he showed up, I think he was just like, just watching him walking in. It was like it's almost like he thought someone was going to jump in and be like, it's just a joke. You're punked. It's like a punked episode or something.
Yeah. You haven't seen a guy with his build do well in boxing, especially at the lighter weight classes, probably since like 1950. I mean, he's just not, he doesn't look the part. He doesn't look like somebody who can box well. And to top it off, he can't box well. Like every once in a while, there's a guy who's just out of shape that can just beat up dudes who are, but he's not that guy. He doesn't throw that punch. He's not the baseball pitcher. He's not the guy who has that whip. It's like somebody shows up with a steel bat and somebody shows up with a wiffle ball bat. And even though the wiffle ball bat has experience, You know, it's kind of like that. I don't know what he was thinking. I don't know.
I think he was thinking about getting paid. That's what he was thinking about.
$500,000 and
Is
then
that what he
some.
got? A
Probably.
$500,000 for that?
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. You know, this is kind of what we were talking about last week, and you were bringing this up. It's just you got to stay on top of your game if you legitimately want to, be good at your craft.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing that he fought for the UFC. I don't know how long ago that was, but like, fighters, even if you're not a fighter, well, no matter what you do in life, you have to stay on top of your game. You have to, because things are always changing. Like life is not, still. It's organic. Things move and grow and change. So no matter what you do, if you're a fighter, you always have to train, and not just train, but always know what your opponent's going to do, because your opponent might have developed something new, like a new leg kick or something like that you've never seen before. You don't know. You always have to be on top of your game. You could say that for teachers. Teachers have to be on top of their game. They have to know what's going on. If you're a history teacher, history, what we see in history changes from time to time. So you need to know those things. You need to know what's going on in current events so you can relate those things to history. I think that's true for anything. Even I was actually thinking about this a little bit with the cop that shot, what was that guy's name? Adam Toledo in Chicago,
Okay.
13-year-old kid. So I watched that thing, and it was fucking heartbreaking. I mean, this kid, he had his hands up, and he got shot. And a lot of people were saying, well, he did have a gun. He had gun residue on his hands, which you couldn't have figured that out just by looking at the guy,
Right. Yeah.
It was 2:30 in the morning. He was running around. Clearly, he was up to no good. But the bottom line is they told him to stop and drop his gun. That's what he did, and put his hands up. That's exactly what he did. Within, 2 seconds later, he was shot. Now, to me, and I'm not an expert, but looking at it, it seems like the cop fucked up. I don't know if it was intentional. I think the cop did it because the cop wasn't on top of his game. It's like I feel like a cop that was on top of his game, as soon as he saw those hands go up, would not have shot that gun.
Yeah, I think that's a good point for a lot of these police officers that make a lot of these decisions. I think that they're only so fueled by their prejudice and their hatred and being a bad person. Like of course that definitely can have to do with profiling and choosing to make the decisions they do against who they do it. But a lot of it just comes down to being off your game and just a lack of awareness, a hypersensitivity, nerves, whatever it is. I saw the clip. I forgot the name. I see a lot of this stuff. It sounds bad to say I forget the name, because how many posts do you probably see videos where remember the name and they list off all these names? I'm like, I don't remember any of these names.
Like, I don't remember.
Yeah. But you're right. It's weird. You got to stay up on your game. You gotta stay in the thick of it. When somebody goes in the line of fire and they go into these intense situations more frequently, or they think about it, they intellectualize it, they plan for it, of course they're going to handle it better. And then you just have to look at the laws of like staying with something. Like, for instance, I did landscaping growing up. I for 4 or 5 years, I did it full time. And then I did it part time when I started being a trainer, more and more. And then I eventually didn't do any landscaping for a few years, started back up. And then when COVID hit, like right after I started back up, essentially, I switched to doing it full time again. But I hadn't been doing it. So there were things I forgot that I needed to do. I would blow grass against the house accidentally in spots. I would forget, to look when I'm blowing off after mulching to blow off the window sills. I would make these little errors that you just don't realize you would do. And I wasn't in the shape. It wore me out more mentally. It was more exhausting to know what I had to do in the day physically. And it took me like a full year, to go through all of the seasons of landscaping to where it's like, okay, now I have it all back down. But if you stop doing self-study, like you said, history, all that kind of stuff. I mean, we were just talking about, but before we started, the laws of adaptation and understanding how strength and conditioning is a really good blueprint to understand, because it gives you such a literal way to analyze how your mind and body are in tune with what you do. And if you stop working out for a month, 2 months, 3 months,
Mhm.
you're weaker, you get exhausted quicker.
Muscle memory's
It's,
gone.
yeah, mentally taxing. You're going to need, I mean, it's just, yeah, it's all gone. It's not even just physical. There's a lot that goes on. The same could be said with school, I'm sure. Um, uh,
See,
Learn all sorts of stuff.
yeah, but the problem is there are some jobs that there's no room for error. So if you are a police officer, there is no room for error. And I am not anti-cop at all. I fucking feel bad for a lot of police officers, because they're in a kind of situation where it's easier for them to lose than it is for them to win. I mean, you guys a hard fucking job, man. That's a really hard job because most of the time your life is on the line. And you got to think about that. If you're chasing someone down an alley, you don't know what the fuck's going to happen. It's probably a pretty good chance that person will shoot back at you. So I get it. Like, I
Yeah.
get that's really hard. But I've also seen a lot of people talk about, and I'm not an expert when it comes to law enforcement, but I have heard a lot of law enforcement experts weigh in on the fact that police in this country are not properly trained. They're not trained enough. And like you're saying, they're not kept on top of their game. I mean, if you think about how many times have you seen a police officer who's completely out of shape, running out of breath, just walking down the street? Like, what is that guy going to do? I mean, he's got a gun, I guess, but like someone who I feel like if you're going to be a police officer, mentally you have to be sharp and physically you have to be sharp. And if you're not both of those things, I don't believe that you're taking the job seriously, and that's not a job you can't not take seriously. And I train with a police officer, and that dude is like, he does jujitsu. He is like, he trains people. He's on top of his game. Like he takes his job very seriously. And I talked to him about this because I'm really interested. I'm very interested in this topic because it kind of feeds into my uh, kind of this idea that we have too many laws in place, and our police officers are oftentimes used in situations where I think it's not even something they should be doing. Like the situation where there's a drunk guy at a bar, and drunk guy comes walking out, and you got 3-4 cops show up with their guns drawn sometimes, depending upon where it is. Like, why do you need that? Can't there just be a cop there with a social worker to de-escalate the situation, take that person home? Like shit like that to me makes a lot more sense than just immediately going towards aggression. It's like the non-aggression principle. So to me, that's the first thing I think about when I saw that 13-year-old kid get shot. I'm like, what the fuck, man? Why did you do that? But then there's the flip side. You're thinking, dude, he's a human. A police officer's a human being. Like it's clear to
Right.
me that police officer panicked and made a bad decision. So what's the solution? Well, I guess better training. I don't even know what somebody was talking about like the time it takes to become a police officer in other parts of the world versus here. And I think in this country, it's like very short amount of time compared to some other, I guess, first world countries in the world. I just don't really like the idea of our police officers not being properly trained, and thus we have these situations.
Yeah, we get a lot of police officers at the gym. I've met a lot through jujitsu, and even within the community of police officers that want to go do something like jujitsu, you still come across people where it's like, oh my God, you're in charge of making these decisions. Like just hearing the way they think, hearing the sort of ethics, maybe not in a terrible way. Maybe it's just their inability to see bigger picture, to have empathy, to be understanding of others. There's just an extreme disconnect. And then a lot of them are extremely immature. I know a guy who patrols some of the worst parts of the city in Baltimore. And it's like, man, you're a kid. You really don't know a lot. And even in the jujitsu thing, it's like, when they're starting out, it's like, whoa, you've already made it through to being a cop. Sometimes there are new cops that come in and you just cannot believe that these people have been in situations where they might need to fend for their life and what that might be like for them when they've never gotten good at that skill. I mean, there's so much. What it takes to actually be a police officer, as far as needing to know the law, needing to know how to have weapon capabilities, to whatever tools you use to read people. I know they're pretty anti-profiling, but I mean, you just need street smart skills. You need communication skills. You need driving ability. There's so much that it takes to being a police officer. And now it's not even a job that people see as being overly, they're not proud of it the way they were, at one point in time. So what types of people fall into it? A lot of the types of people who don't have many other options or don't know what to do with their lives.
And think about how crazy that is. Think about the kind of person you need to be a police officer, and you're basically going after people that can't, I'm not saying it's true for everybody, but, going after people, like you said, that maybe aren't qualified to do much else. I don't know if that's how it is all over the world, but I remember when I lived in Baltimore, man, there were like billboards up, come be a police officer. They were fucking desperate to get cops in there. I mean,
yeah,
I think you should have a college degree. I think you should. That's one. I'm not big on college for a lot of things, but I think if you're going to police officer, you need to understand psychology and sociology and criminal justice and law and all those things. But I think here's the one issue that bothers me too is when a police officer does something wrong, you have, and we're going to go back to making this partisan again too, because you have one side of the aisle that immediately says that cop, was out to hurt somebody on purpose. That's not always the case. And then you have the other side of the aisle that said, I back the blue no matter what. Really? So if someone just murders somebody because they can, that's okay?
Yeah.
So how do we, it's hard enough to come to a place where we can say, yes, we need better trained cops. But how you do that when you have, again, the politics of it coming into play. I mean, look when Trump was in office, man. He was telling people, put them in I don't care if you hit their heads on the car, throw them in there. It's like, that's a great fucking message to send fucking law enforcement,
It's crazy.
Seriously? And then fucking Biden was like, I'm so pro, criminal justice reform and fucking end the war on drugs. Boom. You just did a huge service for fixing the criminal justice problem. No, he can't do that.
Yeah.
It shows you just how serious these guys are about this stuff.
The way that it divides people, that they have to see it as one or the other. They have to see it as, I always back the police, or it's almost like the person, it's like you already know the way they're going to view it based on who they are and like what they stand and what they believe in. That there's just, most people don't swim in the gray area. They don't critically think. They don't weigh pros and cons, checks and balances,
right.
And they just have a hard stance and they're on autopilot. It doesn't even matter. It's like, it's so crazy. The cop could, some of these people who are pro cop, I mean, the cop could do all sorts of things. And the only thing that person watching is like, how can I defend this cop? How can I try and figure out like how to see that side of it? That's the way it is. I mean, that's the way it is with politics, big time. Like like we've talked about, and making it another, split divide like that. It's the way politics work with everything. Anybody who supports Trump immediately just got triggered by what you said about what he said about cops.
Right.
Immediately they got triggered by that. If you mention drone strikes and Barack Obama, anybody who is Democrat is going to be triggered. Even if they don't have a response, even if they don't know what to tell you.
Dude, I was so critical of Trump for those 4 years. And all my friends who are very much on the left would always agree with me. So now Biden's been in office, and I've commented on a couple things. The immigration problem, which is like, they're like, yeah, there's what's changed? There's still like people in cages and shit, and you have no plan yet. And they're like, well, give him time. Give him time. Dude's been in Washington for how long? He was the fucking vice president for 8 years. How much more fucking time do you need? Make a fucking effort. the war on drugs. Oh, well, he's got people around him that are going to help him. Yeah, but he's already showing that he's not taking it seriously. You know, it's like, and look, and here's the crazy thing. I went from being an ally to being a fascist. You know, it's
Yep.
like, really? Really? That makes me a fascist because I don't like to see brown people in cages ripped apart from their families because I don't like the war on drugs. I'm a fascist. Come on, man. Can't we just find a
Oh,
pool to hang out with that hasn't been pissed
hey,
in?
you got to back the blue. Yeah.
Hey,
You know.
yeah. My buddy who's a cop I was telling you about, he and I hang out a lot, and it's funny because he's a pretty intimidating looking guy. So if you were to get pulled over, I could see someone being nervous, particularly if you're not white, because let's face it, if you're black and you get pulled over, you're kind of like, am I going to get shot today, or am I just going to get a ticket? I mean, that's just the reality of it.
Right.
But if you talk to this guy, he is the nicest fucking guy, has no interest in being a bully. He actually became a cop because he didn't like the cops that he saw growing up. He said they were always bullying people and like always starting trouble, and he wanted to do something different. It's very, very interesting to see his take on it, and then him say, I'm one of the few." He said most people are still kind of, at least the ones that he works with, are very much just looking for fights. Now, you know, it's a sad reality that I think that some people just don't want to realize. And you know, we call this kind of libertarian, but this is a very, very much a libertarian stance, like the non-aggression principle. Anyone
Yeah.
who claims to be a libertarian has to say no to police brutality, and not just say no, but stand up against it and fight against it. I don't know how many people are doing that.
That's a good point. I specifically in the Libertarian Party, it's probably an overlooked or um, a principle that should be stood up for stronger. I would imagine, but it's, again, it comes down to politics. The harder you go in that direction, the more you look like you look like a lot of the people you don't like, because if you don't like the group of people that are constantly going on about police brutality, and if you don't like the way they are, right, you know, their view on politics, maybe the way they generalize a lot of things, maybe the way they throw venom in a lot of things that you think is unfair, then you're going to instinctually shy away from making overlapping points and being put in that. Just like you said, you critiqued Biden, and now you are a fascist, right? When you were critiquing police brutality, you were an ally. You critique Biden, you're a fascist, and it's the same. It's, people are afraid. I think that's what it comes down to, and that they can't really see that they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for them to realize that that's what's molding their views, or the fact that we hate the community that is so anti-police and the way they are in thinking, that we don't want to look like one of them. And I think that's probably a big hang up for a lot of libertarians, or why they're cautious about being more outspoken about certain things. It's because you start to look like people that you just don't want to look like.
Well,
You
look, I
know?
mean, you could even go as far, and the reason I bring this up because I know libertarians that have said this, so they completely do not support any police officer because the laws that they enforce are unjust. So, say for example, if you're a police officer, you could be the nicest guy in the world. You're there because you want to make a difference. You want to protect and serve, not just fuck with people. But if you see someone fucking shooting heroin in the alley, like, what are you going to do? You're probably going to arrest that person. Whereas, you know, a libertarian would say, well, you're enforcing an unjust law. You have no right to tell that person they can't shoot heroin. I mean, if you anything, you would take them to a place where they could be safe. How do we reconcile
Yeah. No,
that?
it's a, yeah. Now this is a question. So what percentage of people do you think who would identify as libertarian would be strongly against the war on drugs? Maybe it's not their biggest talking point, but like, do you think that it's so high of a percentage that you could say 80 to 90% probably feel strongly about that?
I would think so.
Okay. Yeah. And then as far as police brutality, how many of them think that would be a pretty serious problem? What would be your percentage?
I bet it's less than that, and yet they're one
Yeah.
and the same, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
what's more brutal than the war on drugs? It's um, not to get off
Yeah.
topic here, but I was just thinking about the last time I got pulled over, and I was speeding, and I got pulled over, and the cop was fine. He was nice. I mean, still give me a ticket, but like I wasn't really nervous. I was just mostly annoyed, and I was, again, it's like that's a privilege that I have. And then I was thinking the previous time I got pulled over was by a female officer, and she was fucking hot. Like she was sexy as hell, dude. Like she was just like she came over, and I was looking at him like, oh shit, like I'm kind of attracted to this woman. I'm a little turned on right now at this woman. I think I just took privilege to a whole new place, right? I think I just triggered a lot of people. But
Yeah.
how fucked up is that I could look at a police officer as a woman and be like, man, like she's really hot. Like that the fact that I would even think that just shows that privilege is a real thing, and it absolutely affects how we see law enforcement. Because thinking about that kid, that 13-year-old kid, or thinking about any number of black people, particularly kids that have been shot by the police, and then how many kids, white kids, have shot places up and have been escorted out by the cops, have been given water. They're still alive. I think
Yeah.
this issue is something that we can't ignore. I think libertarians will sometimes look at this issue and kind of brush it aside and be like, it's not always about race, or it's a left issue if you say that. But it's not a left issue. Because it affects how we view law enforcement. If all the people in this country cannot look to law enforcement and feel safe and secure, then we have a problem, and we will always have a problem. The only thing that's happening now is we have cell phones and the internet. This shit is not new. It's been happening for decades. I mean, I remember listening to like Ice-T records and NWA records back in the 80s, and they were talking about, fuck the police and colors and cop killer and all this shit. I grew up in a pretty, white suburban area just outside of Baltimore. And I was like, there's no way this shit's real. Like what? That makes no sense to me. And then when I was around 16, I got my driver's license and I started going down to Baltimore a lot. And I started noticing some discrepancies in the way people lived, the way people were treated. Maybe there's something to this. And now we have this shit on camera, and we know
Yeah.
there's something to this. And it happens. It continues to happen every day. I don't know what else we're supposed to do. People say, well, if you go out and riot and burn shit down, that's not solving anything. Well, it's not solving anything. But if I were black and I saw black people getting shot by the police every day, I think my instinct would be like, yeah, I want to burn some shit down, because
Yeah.
nothing else is working. No one's paying attention. I never know the answer to these problems, but I think one of the answers is I think we need, as a society, to stop making excuses for people that break the law, like violently break the law, and stop making excuses for police officers who fuck up, even if it's not on purpose.
Yeah.
That's not a, if you work at McDonald's and you're cooking up some fries and you push one of your coworkers into the deep fryer, and they lose their arm or something, pretty sure you're fired.
Yeah.
That's a fireable offense. So how is it any different for a police officer who really has responsibilities far greater than a fry cook?
The big problem I see is that everybody wants to, I don't know if it extrapolates the right word, or just see it as a broader sort of sense, where the second somebody does something wrong as a police officer, they now represent all of the police. I mean,
Right.
whether or not, maybe there are departments and pockets that are specifically worse than others. Maybe you can make generalizations, like obviously there's a more likelihood of a black person being profiled in a way or treated in a way that a white person isn't. And you can definitely see some general general issues, but everything is essentially bigger picture. So the second one police officer does something a certain way, now we need to make a statement to all police officers. Or I understand making a general statement against, like, or for police reform when things like this happens, because that seems like an obvious connection. But we need to have a certain expectation, or you wouldn't see that. So if somebody shoves somebody into the fryer grease or does whatever, pours fryer grease on somebody, and that's an act of whatever it is, assault or whatever you want to call it, that nobody would look at that and say that that's an issue with people in that job thing, right? But if it started happening a little more often, what would you say? I mean, it would take a lot of people doing that specific act before you would start having that view. So even if there's a general issue, these specific issues are still specific issues and need to be seen as individual entities. It's dangerous to generalize to that extreme, and that's what everybody wants to immediately do is generalize.
And
It's
I mean,
tough.
I think like most libertarians that I know, at least, I would say I would call them people that have a wide reach in the libertarian community. Um, it would be nice. Well, let me back up here. Let me just say this. I think that this should be an issue I would like to see the Libertarian Party be more outspoken about, because I think libertarians tend to be more rational. Theoretically, we tend to be more rational when we look at situations like this. I think a libertarian would look at the situation, like Reason actually did a really good article about that kid in Chicago, the 13-year-old. And they just outlined, all they did was outline what happened. This is how it went down. They didn't, and it was a very rational response to what happened. So why isn't the Libertarian Party being more outspoken about this? I would very much like to see the Libertarian Party, when these things happen, put out a press release. We believe in the non-aggression principle. We believe that, if law enforcement needs to be held to a higher standard, and I would even go so far as to say that this could even be turned into kind of a Second Amendment issue too. Think about how many people own guns because they're afraid of the police. I mean, there's a lot of them in Baltimore. You know that.
Yeah.
It's not just because they're afraid of, other rival gangs or something. They're fucking scared of the police. So
Yeah.
I think with the Libertarian Party being silent about this, it does a disservice to the problem. And once again, it does a disservice to the Libertarian Party, which again, it continues to drag its feet when it should be standing up. I mean, I don't want ultra left people standing up in situations like this, because they'll say shit like, we just need to get rid of the police altogether. Or, it's immediately the cops' fault and we need to burn shit down. That's the response of the left, and the response of the right is, I don't care what happened. That person's a cop. He's right, or she's right. That other person was a thug, without even like knowing what happened. What a great opportunity for the Libertarian Party to stand up and say, listen, we believe in law and order. We believe in the non-aggression principle, and I think that would bring at least a lot of attention to the Libertarian Party in a rational way. Because I'm so, like, we've talked about this, I'm so tired of people, like, they talk about the Libertarian Party, like, all libertarians, they have 1,000 reasons why we're crazy, and all conspiracy theorists. Like, this is a very real issue that should be discussed. And you're right. I mean, Libertarian Party talks about prohibition and war on drugs, and that's good. But it's not out there enough.
Yeah.
I think this is, because look, the Democrats are out every time something happens. Republicans are out every time something happens. They jump on that shit because for them, it's a way to speak to their base. Well, libertarian base is very, very small, and if we have any chance of spreading this message of real liberty and real free markets, then we have to be more aggressive. We have to be more out there and sharing, our thoughts on these situations. And I really think that, if done right, there's no person on the right or left that could look at a libertarian response to these shootings and have a problem with it.
Yeah, I think the ability to make a bit bolder of statements and being a little bit more, like we've said, it's the whole thing is what do libertarians strongly identify with, and you start to see, okay, fiscally they seem to have a certain, like it's probably easier to see maybe the way they would look at fiscal politics, maybe the way they would look at like global politics. Those are first two things that maybe come to my mind that I can kind of see a little bit of a firm stance. But the police reform thing, at least acknowledging that there's a problem and maybe having a unique way of going about it. Like you said, breaking down these individual things, there's got to be a third view here between the left and the right. There's got to be a strong third stance that they could make that makes a good amount of sense. And you're right. I've never heard it. I mean, as somebody that's always been kind of fringe, and I pay attention enough to know as much as the average person on something, I've never known what their stance was. I can make the assumption because I knew the war on drugs was a bit bigger of a libertarian thing, but I don't know what I would have said, especially before talking to you about it, what I would have said if I would have thought they were generally more pro the way police is. I assumed police reform would be an interest, but yeah, it would make a big difference, and it's timely. It needs to happen. It needs to happen. Somebody needs to make a statement.
I do think these things do get discussed in libertarian circles, and I've definitely
Yeah.
gone to my share of libertarian conferences, and we talk about this stuff, but we're just talking to ourselves. That doesn't get us anywhere.
But what media outlets, what is the biggest platform right now for libertarian talking points? Or do you think if they were to make a bigger statement about things, a bit more forward, a bit more outspoken, I don't know where or how, what would be the route to go to be heard?
Well, that's the thing. It's like there's no mouthpiece for the Libertarian Party, and maybe that's a fact because there's libertarians in office. Really, I mean, at least at the national level or federal level. So if you have a Democrat in office, obviously there's talking points from the White House. Then you have whoever the right now you'll have the majority leader, the minority leader that could be Republican, depending upon what's happening in Congress at that period of time, who's running, who's got the majority. So those people can come in and make statements, and of course you have the DNC and the RNC. They make their statements. You do see the libertarians make statements on from time to time, but again, I don't think the message is getting through, and maybe it's because we're just telling each other what we already believe. It would be nice to see, and I don't know how you make this happen, but it would be nice to see whoever who's running the Libertarian Party, whoever's going to be the mouthpiece of the Libertarian Party, be more proactive in getting out front of these things. Because look, no one's typically inviting a libertarian mouthpiece, to Fox News or to CNN or MSNBC or whatever channel that you watch. Rarely do you see libertarians invited to the conversation. So I'm a big believer, if you're not invited to the party, but you want to go to that party, you fucking show up. You figure out how to get there. No matter
Yeah.
what you want to do in life, if there's something you want to do, you figure out how to make it. If you really want to make it happen, you can fucking make it happen. You just got to figure out how to do it. And I think that the Libertarian Party has really dragged its feet for a long time in this situation. I'm trying to think if I've ever heard much of a libertarian viewpoint on any outlets. And the only ones I can think of, Fox has definitely had like some libertarian-minded people on there. Certainly, Gary Johnson, was he was running, he would be on Fox, I believe. NPR has had some libertarian people on there, but that's about it. And I could be wrong. I mean, it's not like I watch a whole lot of news. I usually just see what's I usually just see what's online and what's trending, and then I just follow anything I'm particularly interested in. So let's just say that maybe the Libertarian Party needs a more outspoken mouthpiece, someone to be out there, and I wouldn't even say we're spreading the message of libertarianism, just whatever the issue is, the libertarian perspective. because I believe that the libertarian perspective is always going to be superior to the Republican perspective or the Democrats' perspective. And the Republicans and Democrats only benefit from our silence. And that's
Yeah.
how they like it, and that's how they want it. So how do we fix that? I don't know, man.
Yeah.
Someone's got to be more proactive, I guess.
What do you think it does for the party, or what do you think it does when there is somebody that is libertarian, clearly, that has probably been outspoken about it, and then when they go to run for something, they sign up to be a Republican? Do you know that's a common problem that I think holds it back? Like Ron Paul, to a lot of people who don't know, would just be seen what, as a Republican? Like, how many people would think of him as that and not think of him as libertarian? But you know,
I think these days most people would equate him with being libertarian, but yeah, he was Republican. Justin
yeah,
Amash was Republican, and he's always been libertarian mindset. Now he's a libertarian now, but he left office. In office he was a Republican. He's the only guy really in Congress who I ever thought made any sense, at least on
yeah.
a consistent basis. I'm not saying I agree with everything he says, but like, God, the guy's consistent as fuck, man. And they were so happy to get rid of him. Fucking Trump called him little Justin Amash. It's like, really? It's like he's got more fucking honor in his pinky than Trump's got in his whole fucking bald ass head. You know,
Yeah.
it's like, you're right, man. How, is that what has to happen? We have to say, well, we're libertarian, we're lean libertarian, but we're just going to go as Republicans because that's a better way to get in office.
It ruins the left. It really ruins the ability to take liberal-minded people and show them a party that might have a bit more self-respect, not, a little bit more well thought out, and not just being so damn sensationalized and making it about trying to speak just to their people. The left doesn't respect libertarianism, I think, the way they would if it was shown in a more even playground, or if it wasn't under the name of Republican so much. That always threw me for a loop, that one there.
Well, I think a lot of liberals tend to look at, or let's say liberals, but like Democrats and folks on the left would look at libertarians, and the first thing they think about is the Second Amendment, because it's a very real issue for libertarians. We 100% support and advocate for the Second Amendment. But like we were just talking about, the non-aggression principle, that is very much a left-leaning issue. The war on drugs, left-leaning. The way we look at it as libertarians, the left would also look at it that way, in terms of the war on drugs need to end. Criminal justice reform, immigration. And these are all things that I feel like the left would really embrace, but it's all hidden behind the smokescreen of what? Free markets and the Second Amendment.
Yeah. And guys like that, where was he from? Kentucky or whatever we talked about last time. It's the
libertarian
the national anthem. That's the big problem too, is the media's ability to hone in on one idiot, just like we were talking about with the police or whatever. When one idiot does something, they're not one idiot, they're the whole thing.
Right.
It's so easy to make it seem that way in that's what politics. That politics are so that where like you can't even begin to. We had 8 years of warmongering under Barack Obama that was not much different than other warmongering that has gone on, and we still can't get past this imaginary construct in our head that we assume that the left is extremely anti-war, anti-violence, manipulating things globally, feeding off of others in inhumane ways. We want to think that that's not the left and it's only the right. But so we can't even look at it. I guess it all comes in my lifetime. You look at the stuff with 9/11 and then the war in Iraq, and that seems to be in recent history why people maybe kind of see things that way. But I mean, when you look at the Clinton administration and the Obama administration, which sandwiched the years of George Bush, you see a lot of similar things. I mean, it wasn't quite to the brevity as far as being so out there. And then it didn't, not that I say help as if I'm on the George Bush side of things. I'm not. But then you have guys like Michael Moore and stuff bringing a lot of very one-sided on that sort of approach. But it's tough to, I don't know, man. I hate that generalization, and I hate the lack of honest view, because you definitely, how many people even are willing to see where the left and the right are similar in that sort of sense when it comes to war? It's a very small percentage of people, I think.
I was listening to the Sarah Silverman podcast the other day, and she was talking about that in terms of, I guess it was, I forgot the guy's name from Project Veritas, who had video of some of the camps, the refugee camps, that looked no different than what we saw under the Trump administration. And people were saying, they're almost trying to defend Biden. Again, people on the left are trying to defend Biden from what was clearly on video. And Sarah Silverman's like, look, if the right all of a sudden cares about the immigration problem because of Biden being in office, okay, then we can work together on something. Who fucking cares how they came to this place? If the right came to this place because Biden's office, they hate Biden, who fucking cares? If both sides of the aisle can now say, hey, we don't like what's going on here with these people being treated like fucking animals, let's do something about it. I even saw that today on Twitter. George Bush was saying something about, we need to come together to figure out how to do a better job with immigration because it's very inhumane what we're doing. And immediately the left was like, well, where were you during 9/11? And you were doing this and you were doing that. I'm like, why do you fucking care? Why do you care? He's agreeing with you. Who cares how he got here? But we're so stuck in this place. And you and I, we've had this conversation over and over again, and we will likely continue to have it. Hopefully not too much, because I feel like people are going to watch it and be like, but we keep talking about this, but it's hard not to talk about it, because I feel like this is the root of a lot of our problems. And the only way to fix things, if people aren't willing to think for themselves and be rational and not be so partisan driven, for me, I think one of the only ways to change that is to introduce a third party that can offer a rational viewpoint that works for everybody, or more so than what we have now. And like, I've always been so pro, Libertarian Party, because I think in theory, it's the best alternative we have. But we call this kind of libertarian because, I don't know about you, but when we talked about this, I feel a little ostracized, from the Libertarian Party, because it's so disjointed and it's so off base. It's like the best solution we have right now lies within the Libertarian Party, but the Libertarian Party is like showing up to a fight like fucking Ben Askren. You know what I mean? It's like, you're not even fucking trying.
Yeah. It's crazy. You're right. They know they don't have a chance immediately in a way they should think they have a chance. You should have a little bit more gumption there, some sort of, I don't know, man. It's weird when you look at that and then you say, where was George Bush with this? It's so easy to see it in certain ways, but then, and I hate to keep harping on Obama as if I'm like some sort of anti-Obama, pro anything else, but
like black women and white women. You remember that guy?
Oh yeah. Like, do people remember that? When they say, where was George Bush with immigration back with that? But do people remember, where was Barack Obama with gay rights when he got elected? When he won a Nobel Peace Prize, where was he with gay rights? I believe it was 2011 that Joe Biden officially came out, and it was a little bit before Barack Obama being pro-gay marriage and all that. But I mean, you have to understand, that guy ran on a platform of being against gay marriage. And you would never talk about that. It's off limits almost,
Obama did that?
Obama was not pro-gay
I know he wasn't.
marriage.
I know he wasn't for it, but I didn't remember him being like actively
Well,
against
he
it.
was asked about it. It was a thing that got brought up, and it was something that he didn't want to touch, but he didn't not touch it in a way that was supportive of gay rights. I believe it had to do with either under the religious spectrum or something about he believed in the sanctity or
Mhm.
something between a male and a woman.
He didn't care. He did not
He-
fucking care. But he had to play the game, and that's the great thing about the Libertarian Party. Libertarian Party doesn't have to fucking play any game. Nobody fucking
Yes.
cares about us anyway, so we got nothing to lose. We can show up and just be honest. Oh, I'm pro Second Amendment. Oh, you're gonna lose the left. Well, I'm pro human rights and equal rights and end the war on drugs. Oh, you lose the right, but it doesn't matter because you
Yeah.
got nothing to lose. That's the best position to be in when you have nothing to lose.
It's nice because it kind of reminds me, you brought up history earlier, how you need to stay on top of history.
Mhm.
When I think of libertarians, it's almost like, say, as if you were to say, talk about history professors and history teachers widespread. They should have a certain type of knowledge. They have their own viewpoints because of the nature of history, because of what you could generally come to certain conclusions, depending on, you're going to have a lot of similarities in the way people who are under the history profession, the way they think and see things. And I think that the lack of obvious identity in libertarianism probably forces people to think for themselves, think more critically, think more rational, like you suggested. And it's not an easy route to take. It's not one you can just be like a sheep, or it's not one you can just sort of go to without being some sort of a thinker or a free thinker, or whatever, because of the lack of strong identity. So even though it hurts itself, like how we say, like, how do you even define libertarian? It's because it's not the same sort of game that the two main parties play.
Right.
It's not that game. So there is room for individualism. There is room for people who are so extremely different, and that makes it hard to put your finger on. But it's the saving grace as far as being so inclusive of things that both the left and the right see, and kind of being similar in ways, but not being so I guess, like we were saying, with these making these giant generalizations and everything is so black and white and literal, that it's more swimming in the gray area for sure.
Mhm.
It's definitely case by case, individual to individual. And I think if you put a big group of libertarians, well, you could probably speak on this, I'm sure. You put a group of libertarians together and they're having a conversation, it sounds a lot like people thinking and discussing things critically, probably in a um, uh, not extremely argumentative, but in a very individualized way. It's not the same way when you get a bunch of like Democrats together, a bunch of Republicans together, how
Mhm.
they're going to be stroking each other and just venom, venom, venom on the other. Well, the left, fuck the left, blah, 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 bunch of pussies, this and that. I mean, when you hear people at the gym who are all like, I was at a gym this morning in a rural area, a normal workout gym. I went with my dad, and there's like the pocket of like ultra Republican men. It's like a bunch of Rush Limbaughs working out together, and the way they talk, it's just they parrot each other in a way. They rarely disagree with each other. You're almost not allowed to you have no reason to even have any sort of critical discussion with each other. And it's the same exact way my ultra left people have conversations. It's just full on agreement, full on venom to the other side. And it's not that critical dialogue. We haven't had a whole lot of things that you and I disagree on, but we definitely present very different views at times on things. And there will come a time where one of us might see a correction to bring up, or some sort of different way of thinking. And that's just the types of people we are. And I think people like that gravitate towards libertarian. It definitely allows for individual critical thinking.
Well, look, I think if there's ever been a time for the Libertarian Party to strike, it's now. It really
Yeah.
is. I mean, I don't know how much longer. that we're going to be in this situation where, well, no, I do. I think it's always going to be like this from going forward. I don't think it's ever going to get better. I think it's going to get worse and worse and worse until another party or another group of people comes along and changes that. So right now, everybody seems to hate everybody. You can't even,
Yeah.
you write one thing and, I post something in Twitter or I make a comment to someone else's tweet, and it's like, if I say the wrong thing, I'm going to be called all kinds of things. And again, it depends on what I'm talking about. Someone call me a fascist, someone call me a communist, which I think is hilarious, by the way. So I'm like,
That is, yeah, exactly.
you know.
I can relate. I'm the same. I'm the same exact thing. Your friends on the right call you left. The friends on the left call you the right. Like, what am I? How do you even figure out how to fit into this fucking world that sees things that way?
No, that's the problem.
Yeah.
We're all trying to fit into a shitty place. Like it's like you again use the party metaphor. It's like you've been invited to the party, but there's no weed, there's no booze, there's no hot girls. Like, what fuck? I don't want to go. Really, honestly, I don't want to go to that party. But I hear the party on the streets got some fucking mushrooms, got some sweet weed, like beautiful women everywhere. It's like, that's the party I want to go to.
Yeah. Hopefully that's on the other side of death. That party. That's an ideal place to die into.
That always makes me funny. It makes me think about the Married with Children when Al Bundy would always say, "Oh, sweet death, come take me," or something like
yes,
that.
Yeah.
Oh, sweet death.
That he's well, I'm sure he's a great jiu-jitsu guy. Old school jiu-jitsu. He's always been a black belt for a really long time, and one of the, I don't know, I would say one of the first Americans, but he's old school. He's long time, and it just also, I had an image of Fred Sanford when you said that, or it's a very Fred Sanford line when Al Bundy does that, when Fred Sanford, it's the big one or whatever, it's the big one, Miriam, or it's come take me. I'm coming. Oh, that's what I'm coming to join you, Elizabeth. That's what it is. God, Fred Sanford is, those are two juggernauts in TV comedy. Fred Sanford and Al Bundy. Oh my God.
Think about that. Sanford and Son and Married with Children. Those are two shows that were heavily criticized.
Yeah.
Heavily criticized by the left, mostly. I think I mean, well, I shouldn't say that because I don't know. But I remember when Married with Children came out.
That's the one. Keep going. But
people were just like, this is not a representation of American values and all this stuff. And meanwhile, everyone's like, actually, it's a pretty good representation and it's fucking funny. Same with Roseanne. When Roseanne came out, it was just like, oh, that's what most people in America are like. Like that's how most people in America live. That's why the show did so well, and let's go back to the free market principle. It's like, why did those shows stay on so long? Because there was a need, there was a demand that was not being met. And as soon as it came along, it's like success was there. But think about all the shows that could even get made today. Could Sanford and Son get made today? I don't think so. Could Jefferson's get made today? Good Times?
No. A lot. I mean, I was watching that 70s show reruns on Netflix. It was on Netflix. And I was thinking, already we've gotten to the point where you could not have these jokes. There was a lot of, I get that it was a piece that was supposed to take place in the 70s, but still the way the laugh tracks kicked in and the nature in which they were unfolding, it was not socially conscious in the way we are now, and the way things were worded, it would be terrible.
And look,
I'll tell you that
there's definitely situations where I can look at old 80s movies and cringe. I'd be like,
yep.
I would laugh at them, but I'm like, that's kind of fucked up. Like in Revenge of the Nerds, when they put the cameras in the dorms, like to spy on women, like, yeah, that's not good. Like, that's not, as an adult, I look at that, I'm like, that's not, at the time I laughed at it, but now I don't know, maybe I've grown a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking more along the lines of what could be considered socially and politically relevant. And I think when I think of those shows, when I think of All in the Family, that's a politically relevant show. If you cannot do All in the Family today. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I was just.
No, you're good.
And I think that does a huge disservice to us because people, I think it's good to see reflections of America, whether it's good or bad. It's truth. It's like, I think we talked about this before we talked about in Germany, kids are taught at a very young age about World War II. They know Germany's role in World War II. And at a very early age, they know it. So when they grow up, they're not like, Germany's the greatest nation in the world and we've never done anything wrong. Like, they know about the shit that happened. And they do that because, like, we don't want that to happen again. Where, and I think things have changed now, but when I was in school, we learned that the Indians were savages and they killed the people, the explorers, like, that's how it was taught to us. America's number one. We never did anything wrong. We're here to protect the freedom of the world. It's like, that's not a good way. That it's the absence of truth, man. And that'll fucking kill you. That will fucking, that will negate any progress that you can make as a country.
We don't even know the ways that these sorts of things are still instilled within us. We can look at the Native American example because we now know better, right? We now know better than a lot of these things. We still don't even realize the ways in which we haven't peeled back and seen reality and truth for what it is. And there's so much propaganda. There's so many things that we have bought into or that have been pushed on us individually as a whole that we don't even know about. Things about whether it's nutrition, whether it's just unbelievable, whether it's about modern medicine, whether it's about surgery, all these things. And it's crazy because we can see it in certain ways, but yeah, we live in a very odd time or place. I mean, I guess it's always been that way. You can't help but fall prey to that sort of propaganda. So you need to go out and look into things. You need to be a little bit, you question certain things, try to find an honest litmus test, have a difference. You got to be skeptical in some sort of ways because you can't just believe every damn thing like that. And then your environment's huge too. Just who who you hang with, what they think.
I think it's healthy to be skeptical about things, but I think you don't have to be skeptical, overly skeptical and negative about things. I tend to be skeptical of certain things. I'm skeptical of any messaging from the government. I'm skeptical of any messaging from most companies. Things that I have reason to be skeptical of. But just because I'm skeptical doesn't mean I'm not open enough to listen. Because I know plenty of people who are super skeptical about everything. And no matter, something happens, something new comes out, I think we talked about electric cars before. They're skeptical. This is never going to work for any number of reasons. Well, how do you know it's not going to work? Do you know anything about electric cars or motors or the batteries? I don't know anything about it. Do some research if you're really that interested. I understand being skeptical, but be skeptical of things, I guess, that are likely to harm you as opposed to new ideas. And that could, that could be political. It could be media driven, like we're talking about with the television shows we watch. New ideas. What kind of television shows hit? Why do people like certain shows? Why do people like certain movies? If something offends you, it's okay. You can be offended by it and you can look at something and say, this makes me feel uncomfortable. And you can talk about it. I think the problem arises when you try to weaponize that. When you try to weaponize what makes you uncomfortable. I mean, come on, man. Like, are we really that fucking weak that we can't live without being offended? I mean, I don't like being offended, but at the same time, it's like, I'm not going to sit and pout and, try to like put someone else out, or the whole canceling thing.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, and that makes it a safer space to be skeptical, because that's one of the biggest issues with being skeptical is that we are so venomous and a lot of people who are either either whether you are or you're not a skeptical person, we're so quick to just be so harshly critical. And historically, a lot of people who've stuck their neck out and made these statements and have been skeptical of certain things, they get they get shit on and seen as a bad thing. Like, we live in a time, look at the COVID stuff. It seems to me like it would make sense to be any sort of way about it. It would make sense to be skeptical in a certain way. It would make sense to be very pro everybody vaccinate, everybody, socially distance. I could see and understand why anybody would have a strong opinion or anybody would think a certain way. And I think that is, I try to keep that in mind with a lot of things when I'm being skeptical, is not to just be so damning of everybody. But if you are the person that is very skeptical of certain things when it comes to COVID, if you're very skeptical of a lot of things with that sort of thing, a lot of people are quick to burn you at the stake. It's tough. It's tough to be the person that sticks their head out and is skeptical. So I try to be friendly of every sort of, yeah. It's hard to figure out what the fuck is right in this world, man. That's one of the hardest things, is where the truth lies and where the propaganda ends.
And you know what? People, I get crazy when people say they disagree with me about something. And I'll say, well, do the research. I'm like, well, which research are you talking about? Exactly. Someone talked to me the other day about Black people being more likely to be shot by a police officer. Maybe it was, I don't know, shot and killed. Maybe it was just shot by a police officer. And it was like, I'm sorry, I forgot what the whole message stream was, but it came down to, who is more likely to be shot by the police, Black people, white people, Hispanic, whatever the list was. And this woman was just like, white people are more likely to be shot by the police than Black people. And I'm like, that doesn't sound right. So I just looked it up real quick. And sure enough, it's not true at all. And then it was, I forgot where the data came from, but it was like a government accountability office or something like that. It was a legit form. It was a legit place to find data. And there was no response. And like, I'm not trying to start a fight with you or anything, but if the response, like, so many people now are just like, they don't even want to have a conversation. It's like, well, just look at the data. It's like, okay, what data are you going to show me this time? I'm tired, man. I don't have time to look at some, report that you found on fucking Newsmax. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some report that, you found by, I don't know, whatever the left-wing equivalent of Newsmax is, maybe Raw Story or something like that. You're right, man. It's hard. So it really boils down again to being rational. If you're really interested in learning the truth, you do your own digging and see what you find. But you're right, man. We're just flooded with so much information now. It's hard to know what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah. Ultimately, I just think that it's important for me to remember, just because I have discovered something that seems like an epiphany or a realization or a better scope or something, that it's important to, like we talked about previously, try to be understanding, try to empathize, try to get why people think what they think, and not be just so immediately damning, unless they are, like we've said, Hitler, unless you really are just obviously bad, like a rapist. Oh yeah, your sound cut out for, okay.
I was talking with someone about empathy the other day. I was at a grocery store in the parking lot, and this dude was in a minivan, a beat up minivan, and he was getting ready to pull out a spot, and a pickup truck, shitty looking pickup truck, by the way, also came up, and they almost hit each other. The minivan almost hit the guy in the pickup truck. And the dude, the pickup truck, gets out, starts screaming at the guy in the minivan, who's like an older dude. He's probably in his 70s, really disheveled looking. He's screaming at this guy, get the fuck out of the car. I'm going to fucking kill you, and all this shit. So I'm just like, all right, I'm just going to stay here and watch what happens. I called 911 because this dude looked like he was going to fucking kill the guy,
Right.
Call 911, and then I just wait. And then the guy gets up on the dude's hood, starts banging on the hood. So at this point, I'm like, fuck. I'm like, all right, I'm going to get out. I mean, it was kind of like I was nervous because I'm not really a fighter, but it was also a situation of I basically looked at this guy and I'm like, I can probably take a punch better than the guy in the minivan. So let me just get out and see if I can at least try to diffuse this situation. So I got
Right.
to talking to the guy. He was pretty pissed off. And then I finally calmed him down. He gets in his truck, drives off. Police show up just after he leaves. So I'm like, all right, well, this is what happened. The dude in the minivan's like thanking me and everything. Then the guy in the pickup truck comes back around. And I'm like, fuck, is this guy going to start some shit? I'm like, I'm glad the cop's here now, right? He gets out of the car and he's like, I'm sorry, man. And he apologized. And he's just like, I got fired today and I just lost it. You just
Whoa.
had a bad time. The dude in the minivan has been unemployed for, I forgot how long, months. And he was there interviewing for a job at the grocery store. And here I am, like, these two guys are both out of work. They're having shitty times, you know, a shitty time, 100%. And they're in a bad place. And what happened here? You know, give me 1 second. We're going to stop this for 1 second.